The Ao Oni franchise feels like a distant memory to me. Like something you would experience in a crazy dream only to wake up and realise, nope, it's real. It's a thing that exists, I guess. Personally, I only have a passing familiarity with Ao Oni, having watched Markiplier's RPG Maker playthroughs all the way back in 2013.
This away, oh yeah! Oh, no!
A series of videos that collectively got millions of views, which is impressive enough in and of itself, but it gets even more insane when taking into account its popularity in Japan. Ao Oni was such a big phenomenon over there that it spawned a multimedia franchise. There's no two ways about it, that's a damn fine accomplishment, especially considering the fairly simple premise and gameplay. You take control of a high school protagonist and solve puzzles whilst running away from a big-headed purple yandere dev lookalike in scripted sequences. Pretty standard fare for these freeware internet horror games. It's simple but undeniably effective on some level at least, given its popularity and success. I remember being creeped out by it as a kid, but now I can't help it but just see it as like the goofiest thing imaginable. Which is most likely due to it suffering the same accursed fate as 90% of internet horror media out there. That of being memeified and transformed into light-hearted, mass-produced entertainment for kiddies. Regardless, you'd think that would be it. A brief diversion down memory lane for all of 5 minutes until inevitably moving on. But then I discovered the Ao Oni film franchise. Surprisingly, the purple funny face monster was such a hit with Japanese audiences that it was worth making 2 live action movies as well as 1 animated movie alongside them. All of which follow the same premise with slight to major alterations in terms of the main plot. And I thought to myself, what's the harm? I've got 3 hours to spare. Surely they can't be all that bad. Yeah, not the worst movies ever made, but still, shit gets bad. Bad and extremely bizarre too. I didn't want my suffering to be in vain, okay? There has to be some way to justify my time spent watching these god-awful films, and so now I'm going to subject you guys to their awfulness as well. And believe me, it only gets worse as we go on. The animated movie especially is the stuff of nightmares, but not for the creators' intended reasons, I can assure you. Without spoiling anything, fellatio flowers. That's all I'm gonna say. Now before proceeding, I should say that I'm not super well versed on the Ao Oni mythos. I've watched these terrible movies and have a few memories of the original game from Markiplier's playthrough all the way back in the day, but it doesn't really stretch far beyond that. If the movie poorly explains something that the novel makes clear, I'm still going to criticise the movie for doing a poor job of delivering information to the audience. Anyways, enough stalling, let's begrudgingly dive face first into the everlasting abyss that is the Ao Oni cinematic experience. Starting with the 2014 movie simply titled Ao Oni.
Roll the crap!
The film opens right on the action where we see a young girl named Anna being chased around this building, inevitably being cornered by some person referring to her as his sister. Cut to the second funniest on-screen death in cinematic history. I guess that's one way to show someone laughing themselves. This scene caught me completely off guard and had me belly laughing in the middle of the night the first time I watched it. Plus, who would even decide to end it all like this? It comes out of left field and its existence is barely even justifiable in the first place. Oh, and by the way, in case you're curious, the scene comes second only to the kid's death in Halloween Ends. Though in fairness, I don't think that legendary moment will ever be topped.
What was that?
Shortly thereafter, we find out that the kid who unalived themselves is actually Naoki, Anna's deceased brother. Now I get what they were trying to do here. This is clearly an attempt to deliver this information and the fact that Anna feels guilt regarding Naoki's passing without directly telling the audience. Hence why we see Anna witnessing a bullying incident which then cuts back to the chase sequence where she's seemingly apologising to what appears to be her brother. However, this whole intro sequence fails almost completely. The fact that it cuts continuously from future to past leaves the intro feeling needlessly confusing and jumbled, whilst refusing to allow both the past and future scenes to really set in, thus making the opening scares, well, not scary at all. On top of that, despite what I said earlier, they kinda do just spoon feed us what's going on. As we get an opening narration from Anna explaining who the boy was and how he died, and also a brief conversation between two high schoolers discussing whether it was a suicide or not. To make this point even more abundantly clear, let me compare this scene to what I personally believe to be the best Japanese horror movie of all time. The 2002 Ju-on The Grudge film also opens with a creepy scene, but it's far more effective than Ao Oni's. It's short, disturbing, and purposefully vague, so they can spend the rest of the running time slowly cluing the audience in on its significance throughout the film. Ao Oni tries to do the same thing, except it's not really vague or scary, takes twice as long to do, and is far less relevant overall. Moving on, we cut to present day where Anna is having a conversation with her friend Shun about this game Ao Oni. Yes, in the movie universe, Ao Oni is an actual video game that somehow manifests in the real world. And get used to that premise because it also applies to the other two movies as well. She eventually leaves just in time for the arrival of Takuro, the most cunty looking bully you will ever see. Like, damn, do all Japanese bullies look like this? Shit. Well, it's my bullies looked like that. All I got were Ronnie Pickering lookalikes. Anywho, he seemingly manages to coax Shun into joining him and his friends Takeshi and Mika alongside Hiroshi as they explore an abandoned house. Takeshi is a scaredy cat, Mika is a woman, and Hiroshi is a weirdo that likes bugs. I wish I could tell you more about these characters, but there really isn't much to tell. They're your tried and true cast of killables, that's all they really contribute to the film, being pretty stale and flat in terms of personality. So they all enter the creepy house, followed by Anna, who, unbeknownst to the group, had been following them. Naturally, the doors lock behind them and they end up trapped in the house alongside the big-headed CGI demon, which we see via the godlike acting from Anna. It's about as tropey as you'd expect. One after another, they eventually fall prey to the Oni, who kills them all in a brutal and grotesque fashion. Wait, what? Oh, what the fuck? Come on, man. Halfway through the bloody movie and now you're gonna tell me it's censored. Well, in fairness, I'm not sure how much I could get away with showing in the first place, so if anything, they're doing me a favour. If you want to see the uncensored scenes, then go watch Velvet Jam's video showcasing all the deaths in the movie. Well, I say all the deaths, but they conveniently omit the very best death of all. I think it's about time I started talking about some of the strange and ill thought out compositional choices of the movie. You can tell it's trying to go for a low budget, sort of Blair Witch vibe, especially with all the handheld and tracking shots used consistently throughout. But I don't actually know if this film was low budget or not. I mean, it was theatrically released and grossed over 200 million yen or $60 million. Plus, they got a relatively huge CG production company to work on the damn thing. Whatever the case may be, it certainly has a much bigger production cost than your average student film. These type of shots are a predictable way to simulate the feeling of claustrophobia and panic, but it's not really effective in this case. Take for instance the scene where we see Takeshi frantically running around the house. It's accompanied by this goofy sounding music which pretty much negates the little amount of tension this scene creates, which is already low considering the fact that he hasn't actually encountered the monster yet. And so he's just running away because he saw a vase fall over. Pretty underwhelming, I must say. There's also an utterly bizarre tracking shot towards the end of the movie, where for some reason the camera decides to follow the Oni's arse. I don't know why we needed to focus on that. Hell, it's not even that big of a dumper, so it's not like anyone's going to be impressed or anything. On top of all that, the movie is caked in this desaturated filter which ruins even the half decent looking shots. It's a shame too because it's genuinely pretty well lit, especially considering the decrepit nature of the house. Going back to the Oni itself for a moment, yeah, he's the antagonist, alright. The horror. I don't know. You know what I think the problem is, and this goes for a lot of horror movies as well? The creature is way too over-designed. I mean, just compare this abomination to the original Oni. In the game, the monster's body is just a stumpy, vaguely humanoid figure. There's not really much to look at below, so your attention is naturally focused solely on the face, which might be considered goofy now, but back then, pretty damn creepy. On the other hand, in the movie version, you can see the detail on its skin, fingers and feet. Even when you get to the head, you can see the laugh lines, nose creases, and they even gave it bloody pupils. Why? Why was that necessary? It was much creepier without it. All of these seemingly minute details add up and result in you not really taking in the whole appearance at first glance, which is, I'm guessing, what made the game so effective. If you thought this film was just a simple creature feature, then you'd be mostly right, but it's a creature feature with a twist. You see, as it turns out, our secondary protagonist Shun was dead the whole time, and only Anna could see him. Oh. In the opening, we saw Takaro bullying Shun over his game, but what we didn't see was him getting pissed to the point where he hit Shun over the head with a 2x4, accidentally killing him in the process. After realising what he had done, he decides to hide Shun's body at the abandoned house, thus triggering the events of the movie. Maybe this twist would be more effective if I actually gave a damn about Shun, or anything taking place for that matter, but I just don't. And this movie certainly didn't help at all in that regard. But wait, there's more. Shun presumably passes on from this world into the next, and Takaro is killed by the Oni, leaving Anna to escape all by herself. It's here where we come full circle, right back to where we started. We now see that Anna was being chased by the Oni, which is now imitating her deceased brother. In the end, she decides to face her fears, opening the door, and then she's back to the scene with Shun at the start of the film. Yep, it was all a dream. You know that hour of your life you just spent watching the film? Completely meaningless. Fucking amazing, mate. Awesome. If you haven't noticed already, then this film is just a glorified anti-bullying PSA. A pretty bad one at that. Anna makes a mistake of not intervening when her brother was getting bullied, and by the end of the movie she learns her lesson and assures herself she won't make the same mistake with Shun. But like, we barely even know enough about these characters to care. All we know about Naoki is that he went to school, he jumped in front of a moving vehicle, and we're supposed to feel bad for him because of what he did. However, for all we know, he could be a complete douchebag. I mean, that's what I'm leaning towards, considering he just scarred that innocent busker and driver for life. As for the rest of the cast, I mean, they're all complete and utter nothing burgers. Which pretty much sums up this movie, an hour-long nothing burger of epic proportion. That doesn't seem to adapt the game too accurately. Again, I am a layman with this series, but the Oni in the movie just turns the teens into piles of mincemeat. Last time I remember, upon death they would also turn into Onis. At least, that's how it was in the game. On top of that, half of the game was puzzle solving. In comparison, the movie has a total of 1 puzzle, which they managed to solve thanks to it being based on Shun's own game. It almost feels like a meta joke. Like they knew they couldn't solve it without prior knowledge of the game or looking up a guide, so of course Shun has a convenient way of knowing how to solve it already. That's about everything I have to say on this film. It sucks. Without further ado, let's move on to the second film on our lineup, Ao Oni version 2. The second Ao Oni film isn't a sequel or a prequel for that matter, but yet another retelling. Right off the bat, I have to call into question the existence of this movie. Keep in mind, this came out in 2015, a year after the first film. Did we really need another take on the same story that people had only just witnessed? This point is only strengthened by the fact that this film follows the prior entry largely beat for beat. Whether it's ending up at the jailhouse, Takeshi being a wuss and running off, Hiroshi discovering the broken glass, the video game being an actual thing created by Shun, and so on and so forth. Perhaps this was 100% intentional. It's supposed to be an update to the prior movie, like patching an update in a game. That would explain why it's called version 2 after all. God damn. Maybe this movie is a lot smarter than I'm giving it credit for. It's like I said, this movie is practically the same as the last with a new coat of paint. So some of the criticisms I had of the first Ao Oni are applicable here. Primarily the fact that the main Oni isn't really scary at all. However, it is still a new coat of paint, so there are some major changes in terms of the plot and how the characters are utilised this time around. Alongside some new additions and quality of life upgrades that make it slightly better than the last entry. Keyword slightly. For starters, the overall look and composition of the film is worlds better than the first Ao Oni. Across the board, the movie is decently shot, and thankfully they removed the poop filter from the last film, so not everything looks desaturated as hell. It's also worth noting that they did a better job at setting up Naoki and his impact his death had on the group. For the most part. At the start of the movie, we see Takaro gleefully scrolling through pictures on Takeshi's phone, until they reach photos with Naoki in it, making the group fall into silence, to which Takaro quietly deletes the photo. Now that's how you establish background context and character motivations without directly telling the audience. Exactly what the first movie intended to do, but failed miserably at. When it comes to the characters, instead of Anna and Shun taking the reins, this time around it's Hiroshi and Takaro who take the spotlight. To the film's credit, these two are far more interesting than any of the characters from the first film by a country mile. Though that's not exactly a high bar. Hiroshi especially is glowed up a tad in comparison to his prior debut, actually having a personality and a character arc this time around, imagine that. He goes from being a rather timid and disconnected kid who's not too attached to other people, or how they think, to being understanding and compassionate to Takaro, who is by all means an absolute arsehole. Asumika and Takeshi, they exist alright. They're pretty much identical to their counterparts from the first movie, though Takeshi does have one of the weirdest laughing scenes I've heard in a movie. With all that being said, the acting overall is still pretty damn stilted and wooden. Now you might be wondering how the game manifests into the real world, considering this isn't just a vivid imagination of Anna. And well, it just does. I don't believe it's ever explained why this happens, but like the first film, as soon as they enter the abandoned house, the freakishness begins. Shun isn't actually dead in this movie, now reduced to a background character who doesn't show up to the house until the end of the movie. The same goes for Anna, who is also portrayed just as blandly as she was in the other movie, barely showing an ounce of emotion when discussing her brother's suicide, so not much has changed. The reason Takaro and friends enter the house is to record a live stream. Why is this movie better than the prior film again? Sure, there's some supplemental upsides, and the characters kinda have a better showing, but so far the main plot is actually worse than the other film, which was already pretty fucking awful already. I know the plot is just an excuse for the cast to interact with and get killed by the Oni, but even that is almost objectively way worse than the prior movie too. The gore is actually way more toned down in this version, with a lot of the deaths happening either off screen or in a blink and you'll miss it moment. However, the big head Oni isn't the only thing attacking our cast. Version 2 comes with the inclusion of a new Oni called Blockman, or Fuwati in Japanese. I think that's how you pronounce it, I don't know. I know it's supposed to be a parody of Domo-kun, but whenever I look at this guy, all I can see is Super Meat Boy's edgy counterpart. I'm guessing he was included for fan service reasons, paying tribute to the game by adding another one of the monsters, therefore appeasing the fans in the process. His appearance mainly serves towards showcasing and improving the relationship between the two protagonists, who have to team up in order to kill this thing. So I suppose it's good for the people who can appreciate this kind of inclusion, but he doesn't really do anything for me. I may have highlighted Hiroshi earlier on, but to be honest, this is Takaro's movie. He has the most prominent and in my opinion most reprehensible character arc in the film. Like the first Ao Oni, Takaro is once again an arsehole that is partially responsible for Naoki's suicide. Though this time, they decide to make him the centerpiece and redeem him. Now look, I'm not saying someone like him is beyond redemption, but as you can imagine, it's not earned in the slightest. The film ends similarly to the first, wherein Takaro ends up awakening right before entering the house. This time around deciding not to be a douche to Hiroshi and not entering the creepy building. The problem here is that Takaro gets absolutely no comeuppance, no penance or punishment whatsoever. He practically gets away scot-free with what he's done. In fact, he barely even acknowledges Naoki at all outside of the opening scene I praised earlier. What's worse is that Naoki's ghost continuously haunts Takeshi throughout the movie. Like, hello? Priorities, man. Why aren't you going after Takaro for Christ's sake? Resulting in an even more tone-deaf anti-bullying PSA than the first film. While there are a few scant improvements here and there, ultimately it sucks just as bad as the previous Ao Oni entry. With new changes comes new problems, which the film overwhelmingly delivers on. Now it's time for the movie you've all been waiting for. Let's finally cover 2017's Ao Oni the animation, and may God have mercy on our souls.
Never thought I'd say it, but I'm looking forward to killing myself.
This is definitely the biggest departure in the Ao Oni trilogy, if you can even call it that. Both from the game and the established premises and tropes of the first two movies. The film opens on 3 woke Krillins living in the forest who all get attacked by the Oni. They never come up again, so pay them no mind. We cut to present day where we see a group of teenagers who are all a part of the Anthropology Club. These are completely new characters, not from the game or the prior two movies. The main cast consists of Shoichiro, Koji, Sho, Karin and Junko. Don't worry about memorizing their names because none of them matter in the grand scheme of things. Together they investigate a local legend which, you guessed it, turns out to be the one and only Ao Oni. However, for some reason, despite the shorter length, the movie insists on wasting the audience's time with pointless, overly complicated mysteries and school gossip drivel. No really, the first 30 minutes are torturous due to this very reason. We get this huge heap of context and background for Shoichiro. We know he's best friends with Koji, he's jealous of another character called Tachibana who is apparently banging all the chicks at school, and he has the hots for the school nurse. Does any of this matter whatsoever? Hell no! He's the first character, not including the Krillins, to get killed off by the Oni, and it happens within the span of a few seconds. What was all that bloody setup for? His character amounted to exactly less than nothing, yet we wasted so much time on his dumbass, it makes no sense. And believe me, it's not any better with the other characters either. By now you've probably noticed the animation, which, yeah, it's it's crap to say the least. The characters are constantly missing noses, the models move so stiffly you'd think they were zombies, and there's so few frames to make even Berserk blush. If I can give the movie one thing, it's how the shitty animation actually does inadvertently make the Oni more scary than it usually would be, at least in comparison to the live action films. Though that point is also kind of mute, when looking at the humans who are somehow even more terrifying than the giant blue demon. The fact that the setting the movie takes place in feels just as half dead as the humans certainly isn't helping things. It's a bloody ghost town. We never see any other students other than the primary Oni bait, and it's made all the more jarring when we see scenes of the crew walking around the vacant building with no sign of intelligent life anywhere. The first half of the movie is definitely more of a mystery and less of a horror. Mysteries which, like I said, are way too convoluted for their own good, so to save us both the trouble, I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes version. Long story short, we find out that the Oni is actually a former human who receives a sloppy jalopy from a species of purple flower. A plant that takes the form of a beautiful woman which, after giving you service, causes your sausage to rot and fall off, turning you into an Oni. Trust me, this ain't a bit. That's literally what it does. Tachibana had been keeping this flower under the school basement, hence why the Oni managed to invade the school. But of course, he was, dipping his wick inside it too, so eventually he turns into another Oni. The crew decide that the best way to deal with this threat is to burn the flowers in the basement, which should hopefully kill the Onis. Spoiler alert, it doesn't work, and everyone gets killed. Except for the school nurse. Wait, what? Yep, I guess it wouldn't be an Ao Oni movie without a twist. In the end, we discover that the whole time the school nurse was actually the flower taking the form of a woman, and so she was the one who created the Onis in the first place. God, I feel dirty just explaining it. Doing so to preserve the flowers which were apparently being killed off by the humans. It's also revealed that everyone Tachibana banged has also got the Ao Oni disease, so now there's gonna be a lot more Onis wandering around. I mean, what do I even say to that? I'm sorry, but I can't think of any witty comment or joke to make of this. It's just there, it's just a thing that unfortunately my eyes had to witness. Yeah, the movie's bizarre, but not bizarre enough to make it an interesting watch on an ironic level. Because in order to get to the fellatio flowers, you have to sit through 50 minutes of boring, unwatchable pap that'll make you want to gouge your eyes out. As far as I know, this has nothing to do with the Ao Oni games at all. Like the live action movies, the Ao Oni game actually exists in the movie's universe. Though here, the game's creator was killed by the flowers as to stop the high schoolers from finding out the truth at the start of the film. To be honest, the game's inclusion feels like an afterthought, to remind the audience that what they're watching is indeed an Ao Oni property, despite literally everything other than the monster suggesting otherwise. Funnily enough, there's also an Ao Oni animated series which came out after the movie, and from the looks of it, it's a bloody kids show. Imagine being a kid watching either this show or a YouTube playthrough. You like what you see, you go and seek out more Ao Oni content, and wouldn't you know it, little Timmy is now going to be scarred for the rest of his childhood. I guess I can't say much. I mean, as a Sonic fan growing up, I can relate. So there you have it. The 3 Ao Oni films currently in existence. What did we learn from all this? I don't know. Beats me. I just wanted to talk to you guys. But in all seriousness, Ao Oni sits in this kind of weird place in the same position as Five Nights at Freddy's, at least from my perspective. I'm not a fan of the franchise, but I can recognise the profound impact it had on people at the time, hence its popularity. It scared me as a kid, so I don't doubt it had made others shit their britches too. When it comes to the movies, each entry is different in one way or the other. However, they all seem to experience similar issues that hold the films back from being a strong adaptation of the source material. Most notably the lackluster showing of our primary cast of characters, which then results in the viewer not caring about the twist, their fates, and the consequences of their actions. Combine all that with an overly convoluted plot on what should be a relatively simple premise, and you've got yourself an adaptation that tries way too hard, takes itself way too seriously, and in the end, doesn't reach anywhere near the heights of the game that started it all. With that being said, that's all I have to say on the Ao Oni movies. Like if you liked, dislike if you disliked, subscribe for more quality content, and I'll see you guys next time. Ma.
Have some more chicken. Have some more pie. Have some more chicken. Have some more pie. Have some more chicken. Have some more pie. It doesn't matter if it's boiled or fried. Have some more chicken. Have some more pie. Have some more chicken. Have some more pie. Have some more chicken. Have some more pie. It doesn't matter if it's boiled or fried.